Have you ever moved into a new home, hoping for a fresh start, only to realize that something about the place feels off? That's exactly what happened to Emily Carter, a 28-year-old graphic designer who thought she'd found the perfect house in a quiet Baltimore suburb. But what started as a peaceful new chapter in her life quickly turned into a nightmare she'll never forget. This is her story. I'd always loved the idea of living in a quiet neighborhood. No noisy neighbors, no traffic, just peace and quiet. So when I found this 2-story house for rent on the outskirts of Baltimore, I thought it was perfect. Sure, it was a little older than I would have liked, and the basement gave me the creeps, but it was affordable and I needed a change after my breakup. The first few days were great. I set up my home office, unpacked my boxes, and even met my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who seemed nice enough. But then, on the third night, I heard it, a faint knocking sound coming from the basement. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling. You know how old houses are, they creak, they groan, they make all kinds of weird noises. But this was different. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Like someone was down there, tapping on the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and went to check it out. The basement was cold and damp, and the smell of mildew hit me as soon as I opened the door. I shone the light around, but there was nothing there, just the washer and dryer, some old boxes, and a few cobwebs in the corners. I told myself I was being paranoid and went back upstairs, but the knocking didn't stop. It went on for hours, soft but persistent, like it was trying to get my attention. I didn't sleep much that night. Emily tried to brush off the strange occurrence, but things only got worse from there. The next day, her phone started ringing. At first, she thought it was just a spam call, but when she checked the caller ID, her blood ran cold. It was her own number. She answered, but there was only static on the line, broken by faint, garbled whispers. She hung up, but the calls kept coming, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes while she was working. Each time, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. And then there were the footsteps. Emily would hear them late at night, pacing up and down the hallway outside her bedroom. She always kept her door closed, but more than once she woke up to find it slightly ajar, as if someone had been watching her while she slept. She called her brother, Mark, who lived about an hour away. He tried to reassure her, telling her it was probably just her imagination or maybe a prank from one of the neighbors. But deep down, Emily knew something was wrong. One night, she decided to set up a camera in the hallway to see if she could catch anything. What she found still haunts her to this day. I watched the footage the next morning, my hands shaking as I fast-forwarded through the night. At first, there was nothing, just the empty hallway and the faint glow of the nightlight. But then, around 2:17 a.m., I saw it. A shadowy figure appeared at the end of the hallway, just standing there, motionless. I couldn't make out any features. It was just a dark, human-shaped silhouette. And then, slowly, it started moving toward the camera. I stopped the video and called Mark, begging him to come over. He agreed, but it would take him a few hours to get there. In the meantime, I tried to stay calm, but the house felt different, colder, heavier, like the walls were closing in around me. That's when I found the journal. It was in the attic, tucked inside an old box of junk. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic, and the entries were dated from the 1980s. The previous tenant had experienced the same things I was going through: the knocking, the footsteps, the shadowy figures. The last entry read, "It's in the walls. It's watching me. I can't leave." I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was losing my mind. And then, as I was sitting there in the attic, I heard it, a child's voice, calling my name from downstairs. "Emily, Emily." It was soft, almost sweet, but it sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my phone and ran outside, waiting for Mark to arrive. When he got there, we searched the house together, but there was no one there. Mark thought I was overreacting, but even he couldn't explain the muddy footprints we found leading from the back door to my bedroom, or the cryptic message scrawled on the basement wall, "You're not alone." I decided to leave that night. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. But as I was packing my car, I heard the voice again. "Emily, don't go." I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was just tired of running, but I went back inside, and that's the last thing I remember. When Mark came back the next day, the house was empty. My car was still in the driveway, my bags still packed, but I was gone. Emily was never seen again. The police searched the house, but found no signs of forced entry or struggle. The case remains unsolved to this day. As for the house, it's still there, sitting quietly at the end of that tree-lined street. The new tenants moved in a few months ago, and so far they haven't reported anything unusual. But if you ever find yourself in Baltimore and you happen to pass by that house, listen closely. You might just hear a faint knocking sound coming from the basement. And if you do, don't go inside. The Lord Baltimore Hotel, a historic landmark in the heart of Baltimore, Maryland. Known for its elegance, its grandeur, and its dark, unspeakable secrets. Tonight's story comes from a young woman named Clara, a story that begins with a simple check-in and ends in a nightmare she'll never escape. Clara was a broke college student running from a toxic relationship. Her ex, Daniel, had been relentless calling, texting, begging her to come back. But Clara was done. She needed a fresh start, and when she found a cheap last-minute deal at the Lord Baltimore Hotel, she thought it was a sign, a chance to breathe, to move on. But the hotel had other plans. The moment Clara stepped into the lobby, something felt off. The air was too still, too heavy, the staff polite but distant, their smiles never reached their eyes, and the mirrors, Clara swore her reflection blinked, but she brushed it off. She was tired, stressed. She just needed sleep. Room 1410, that's where they sent her. A corner suite with a view of the city. But as soon as she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her. No draft, no explanation, just silence. And then the giggling. It was faint at first, a child's laugh echoing from the hallway. Clara froze. She told herself it was just another guest, maybe a family staying nearby. But then, the knocking. 3 sharp raps on her door. She opened it. No one there. Just an empty hallway, stretching endlessly in both directions. And that smell, burnt roses. Sweet, but sickening. Clara shut the door, her heart racing. She tried to call the front desk. No signal. Her phone, it glitched. Daniel's voicemails played on a loop. "Clara, I'm sorry," until the audio distorted A deep guttural voice growled, "You shouldn't have come." Clara panicked. She grabbed her bag and bolted for the elevator. But when the doors opened, it was empty. No buttons, no lights, just a cold, dark void. She tried the stairs, but no matter how many flights she descended, she always ended up back on the 14th floor. The walls seemed to close in around her, their surfaces slick, almost alive. And then she heard it, a voice, Daniel's voice. "Clara, I'm here." She turned, and there he was, standing at the end of the hallway, pale, smiling. But his eyes, they were wrong, too dark, too empty. "Clara," he said, reaching for her. "You're home." Here's where it gets worse. Clara knew something was wrong. Daniel, he died in a car crash the day she left him. The voicemails, they'd never been sent. The hotel, it had been feeding on her grief, using her pain to keep its doors open. And when she finally broke, screaming his name, the mirrors shattered. The walls, they pulsed, and Daniel's form melted into smoke, his smile twisting into something monstrous. The last thing Clara saw before the darkness swallowed her whole was the number on her door, 1410, but the 1, it wasn't a 1 anymore, it was a 7. Clara's story doesn't end there. They say if you stay at the Lord Baltimore Hotel, if you dare to book room 1410, you'll hear her, sobbing, begging you to run. But here's the thing, the front desk always has fresh roses, burnt roses, and no one knows why. So, if you're ever in Baltimore, maybe think twice before checking in. Sweet dreams. It was supposed to be just another Friday night. You know the kind board, scrolling through your phone, looking for something, anything, to break the monotony. That's when Jake texted the group chat. "Let's check out Druid Hill Park. You know, the one with all the creepy stories." We laughed it off at first. I mean, who actually believes in urban legends, right? But then Jake said the words that sealed our fate. "Come on, it'll be fun. What's the worst that could happen?" By midnight, we were standing at the edge of the park, flashlights in hand, joking about ghost stories and how stupid we'd feel if nothing happened. But something did happen, something none of us could explain, and by the time we realized how wrong we were, it was already too late. This is what happened that night. We'd all heard the stories, of course, the legends of people disappearing, of strange lights flickering in the woods, of laughter echoing from empty playgrounds. But we were skeptics. We thought it would be fun to poke around, maybe even debunk the myth. We arrived just before midnight. The park was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes your skin crawl. You know that feeling, right? When the air feels heavier and every little sound a twig snapping, a leaf rustling makes your heart skip a beat. We joked at first, mocking the legends, trying to lighten the mood. But then the temperature dropped. My breath turned to fog in the warm October air. And that's when we heard it, a child's laughter, sharp and clear, echoing from the empty playground. We froze. The sound was unmistakable. But when we turned our flashlights toward the swings, there was no one there. No one we could see anyway. That's when things started to go wrong. We tried to leave, but the paths, they didn't make sense anymore. The trees seemed to shift, their branches twisting to block our way. The laughter turned to crying, then to scream-shy, pitched and desperate, like they were coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. One by My friends vanished into the darkness, their voices cut off mid-scream, swallowed by the shadows. I was alone, running blindly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I had to get out. That's when I stumbled upon the gazebo. It was old, its paint peeling and wood rotting, like it hadn't been touched in decades. And there, in the centre, was a mirror that shouldn't have been there. I don't know why I looked into it. Maybe I thought I'd see a way out. But what I saw, it wasn't my reflection. It was a little girl, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and black. She reached out, and I felt an icy grip on my wrist. Her voice was a whisper, but it echoed in my head like a scream. "You're one of us." And then everything went black. I woke up in my apartment the next morning, my friends nowhere to be found. At first, I thought it was a nightmare, some twisted trick of my mind. But then I looked in the mirror. My reflection was wrong. My eyes, they weren't mine anymore. They were darker, emptier, like the eyes of the girl in the gazebo. And every night since, I hear the laughter. I feel the pull of the park, like it's calling me back. Because the truth is, Druid Hill Park doesn't just take people, it replaces them. And me? I'm not me anymore.